So today we are going to talk about this older and maybe lesser known Fuji camera, the Fujifilm X70. So here, so what it looks like. Now the one I have is missing the ring here, but it has the same filter thread as the X100V. So when I am not using the filter on this, like I can switch them in and out. I generally always have my Pro Mist filter on my X100V because I love the dreamy effect it gives. Probably wouldn't be bad to have it on here too. It's just that this is so thin without anything on it that it's like quite nice. Now, if I do put mine on there, I have the adapter and then the Pro Mist. This is the quarter strength, which is what I prefer. So a little bit bigger, still not bad. I love that this has a flip up screen. I wish Fuji did that more. I wish more cameras did that because when you are either trying to take selfies with people, like if you're using this as a travel camera, it's a great way to get photos together without having to use your phone. But also, I am one of those people who likes to take photos using my phone on a tripod. So it really helps when you can see where you are in the frame because trying to use the app is just terrible. I wanted to go into more about the X70. I want to show you comparisons. So compared to my Canon G7X Mark III, they are very similar in size. So very similar cameras. The difference is this is an APS-C camera. No in-body image stabilization. So unless you've got really steady hands or you can fix it in post, you're probably not using this for video, which is fine. I am not a video person. I'm so tired of all the reviews I see just being focused on how cameras do video and not just how they do photos, because some cameras are not meant for all things, and that's totally fine. Like Fuji is much more photo-centric, and that's part of why I love them. The reason I have the G7X is because we do so many videos and like our travel vlogs and things that my husband and I do that are, we keep those for ourselves. It's like our home movies, but that's what we use instead of like the giant video camera my parents used to have. But the main reason I love this camera is my Fuji X100V is not a small, or is not a large camera. Like you'll see them here. So very, again, kind of similar in size, but obviously this one is also much bigger and heavier. Don't know how well you can see those, but either way, when you go to places now that are being much more picky and specific, like venues, whether it's sports venues or show venues, like things like that, they're all like, you can have a point and shoot camera basically, which granted, the X100V is a point and shoot camera, but I have had at least one venue tell me, no, we don't really think that is. It really needs to fit in a shirt pocket. And I'm like, that is the weirdest rule I've ever heard. Well, this fits in a shirt pocket. This is the size they mean. So if that works, this works. Because and a lot of people don't understand this, I am never happy with the photos from my phone. I just don't like how it over sharpens them. The quality is terrible. I hate that. So I want a camera with me. Usually I take the G7X, but I really don't love the photos off of that one either. They're just meh, and then I still have to edit them, and that is the big part of Fuji's for me, is you don't have to edit them. If you don't want to, you can. But the G7X also it's not always clear, even though like it's got, I don't actually know if it has any better stabilization than this for photo stuff. Like, I really don't know. But my photos never seem fully clear on there. I'm not into the flash trend that everybody else is doing, like that they're buying all these cameras for now. Like, I'm like, I don't use my G7X for that. This does have a flash on it. If you're interested, it does. But I don't need that. This is basically just a camera, photo-centric version of the G7X to me. But the Fuji quality, and this being an APS-C sensor size camera instead of the 1-inch sensor that comes in like the usual point-and-shoot digicams, means the photos are gonna be so much better. I'm not usually taking photos like of the shows that we're at or things. It's literally just like of us like going to things, of us like when we go to things, we go downtown. Well, that's like the only time we ever go downtown. So when I want to take photos, I want to have my camera. I don't want to I can use my G7X if I really had to, but I don't want to. So I have learned most places that have the fancy metal detectors, if my X100V is in my bag, it doesn't set them off and they don't check. So I'm like, well, and they said too when I emailed them, as long as it's a point and shoot, you'll be fine. But that was for other venues, not the one that told me that it had to be a shirt size pocket that has to fit in your shirt pocket, which I'm like, how am I gonna test that? I don't have shirt pockets. But also that was a very bizarre rule. Like, I'm like, it was funny because it was my X100V that they made me take back to the car, but I was like, This, if I'd had it with me, would take much better videos and stuff of the stage if that's what you're really worried about with it. I'm like, because this actually zooms. That thing doesn't zoom or do anything else. So, but let me grab my little notebook of the pros and cons I have of this compared to like those and just in general, because I think that'll be really helpful for people too. I have made a little list here. So some of the things I've kind of already mentioned, but I'll go into more detail. So pros being it's small. It's even smaller than the X100V. It's still got the quiet leaf shutter, so it's very discreet, which I love. You can turn the sound on if you want a shutter sound, but you don't have to. You can still do custom simulations and recipes. You do have the regular Fujifilm simulations that are in there, but you can put, I think, 7 customizations. You can't save the names on them like you can in like X100V and other models. You also don't have access to all of the options for these simulations, which can be frustrating with some of them. Like I like to put grain on mine. Grain's not an option, so that's like one of the downsides too, but I'll get into more of that later. Again, like I said earlier, it has the same filter thread as the X100V, which means filters and stuff, like they all work interchangeably. Now, the TCL is not made for the X70. It actually has a wide lens for it, but I don't need anything wider than what it already is. This is my one for the X100V, but it does actually work on the X70. It just doesn't tell it that there is a teleconversion lens on there. So you can still zoom in, do digital teleconverter with this on it and everything. There's just some vignetting, which you can get rid of in post. It's really not a big deal. So I found that it's really nice that that also would work on here, because I am a prime telephoto girl mostly. So this is a very wide focal length, that like 27, 28 millimeters full frame equivalent for me. Widest I usually go is 35 unless I'm doing real estate. So that is one of the things I have on the pros and cons list, because a wide lens can be great. You're traveling, you can get more of the background in with people. When you hand your camera off to someone to take your photo, they get more of you all and the background in. But also, if you like to get closer to things, a wide lens can be a little more challenging. I love that it has the flip up screen that I showed you guys earlier for the reasons I already mentioned. It has a touch screen, which was not normal on Fujifilm cameras at that time. My X100V is the first one of the X100 series to have a touch screen, and that was a big reason why I upgraded from the F, because I like to use touch shutter focus when I really need to nail focus really fast. We'll get into the focus of this later. But yeah, so I love being able to use touch shutter focus. Let's see. And then, okay, both a con and a pro is the price, depending on what else you're looking at. If you are looking at an X100V, the price on this is great. If you're looking at this as a really old camera, the price on it now is not great, because I think, and I think now if you look on eBay, it might be around like $600–700. It's not cheap. But at the same time, that's about what the Canon G7X is going for. The X100V is going for much more than that. So it kind of depends on what you're looking for and what your needs are. If you are wanting just a small, compact, tiny, pocket-sized street camera, this is phenomenal. Now, the other thing with it is like the Fuji colors. That was my other pro, is that like compared to things like my Canon G7X, I would still have to take those into Lightroom and edit them afterwards. Whereas this, I can do that, but I don't have to. And that's what I love, because if I want to just take it really fast and send it to someone, it's already good. And especially when I have this Pro Mist filter on there, I feel like my photos already look so much better anyway, just because it softens them and adds this like gorgeous like diffusion effect to them. And I love how the photos look like that. So now into the cons. So there are less manual controls on this camera, as you guys can probably tell. You can do the shutter speed up here. The exposure compensation I don't think works in full manual mode, which is odd to me. So you can't use that. But I have one of my buttons back here set to give me the ISO controls, but sometimes they don't always like come up right away. I don't know. It's a little finicky on some things. Some people will use their extra ring up here to set it for ISO on the lens, but I have mine set for the digital teleconverter, because for me, that is more something I really need. There are a lot of custom dials and buttons on this though. It's just not as much the manual ones. It does have an auto mode that I have not used, but the record button is almost impossible to press down. I've tried it a few times, but you can also use the drive mode to get you to other things too. So that's, you know, a little different, but it's not as limited as like the XF10, which has even less manual controls. Like I already said earlier, there's some things that are missing from like the recipes and stuff, like the grain, the color chrome effect, the blue effect. You cannot, and this was also an issue when I had the F, which bothered me too. When you are saving custom settings, if you're saving like auto white balance, but you want to also have like the red and blues adjusted, which sometimes is part of the recipes in Fuji Weekly, you can't save those. You can save a Kelvin, you can save white balance, but you cannot save all of those others to this. And unfortunately, that is kind of frustrating. So that's another one of those things where a lot of the recipes on Fuji X Weekly are meant for much newer cameras with the X-Trans4 sensor and all those. This is very old. So being an older camera, it does have those issues, but I do think for as old as it is pretty well advanced for Fuji. They really should have made an X80, and I wish they would, but I don't see that happening. The app. We don't even need to talk about that. It doesn't use the new app, it uses the old app. That's all I need to say for you to understand why it's a con. So most of the time I carry my little SD card reader, and that's how I take things off this camera, because if I never have to use that app again, that's great. So I haven't really ever tried using that app for like remote shutter stuff with this, because I just don't even want to think about how that would go. I already have issues with the new one staying connected and like with it lagging when you do that, so. The focus on this is not the best. It hunts a lot. It like pulses in and out when you do even the touch shutter. I will say 9 times out of 10 though, it still nails the focus. It hunts a lot and it's kind of irritating. And that's even when I have it on single or continuous, it does that. So it's not just because it's on continuous or something. The f2.8 lens is not my favorite. It does make it, you have to bump things like the ISO up a lot more when it's darker. You know, it's not going to give as much light as the f2 that's on the Fuji X100V. I do wish it was at least an f2. I mean, heck, I wish it was more than that, but it still shows more depth of field though than my Canon G7X, even though that one has a 1.8. That one like never really shows depth of field. And now in Lightroom, you can edit that even more if you need to, if that's really a big deal. I can still get a pretty good depth of field blurry background with this thing, so it's not bad. It's just not my favorite. It is a wider lens, like I said. Sometimes if you're like me and that's not your preferred focal length, it's frustrating, but it still works well. I tend to sometimes carry just this and my X100V with me, so I'm weird like that. Though this was the other one. Teleconversion, the digital teleconversion, I love using. One of the other reasons when I switched from the F to the V was because when you switch to the V, you can finally use it with JPEG and RAW on at the same time. You can't do it with this. It's like the older models. You have to have it only on JPEG to use the digital teleconversion, which I understand is because it's digitally cropping the photo. And when you pull the RAWs, they're gonna look like they're not zoomed in at all, which I get that. But it's having that option there, whereas with this, I can't even plan to use it if I have this on RAW. So I pretty much just shoot with this one on JPEG. It's also 16 megapixels, it's not as much. I haven't noticed a big difference in quality though, to be honest, so I think it's still a great camera. But yeah, those are my thoughts. I am getting a hot shoe cover for it because this one didn't have that. It didn't have a lens cap, but to be honest, if I'm gonna have a diffusion filter on there and stuff all the time, the lens caps don't really fit on that anyway. So actually I have a spare X100V lens cap that I can just keep on here because when this filter is on here, it fits on there. It did also come with this. It came with its own little filter and lens hood too. But I probably won't use this one. I also prefer it to be more silver, so it's just nice to have it. And I have 2 batteries with it because the battery life is not fantastic, but being a smaller battery, I didn't expect that. If you guys want to see more photo samples, I will have more on my Fuji Instagram, which is Allie's Fuji Snaps. And then I have a photography TikTok, which is Allie's Photography, which I post a lot about my Fujifilm cameras. Like, if I could go back in time, instead of picking Olympus in the beginning, I would have picked Fuji because I really picked Olympus for the vintage style of the camera. And I think I would have been even happier if I had just started with Fuji and stuck with it, because I'm at the point in my life now with my photography career, I keep to the Canons. With my regular life stuff, I keep to the Fujis. It's this, it's my X100V or my X-T30. So you can see kind of size here too. But yeah. And I can get some great portraits out of the X-T30, but it's not what I would use for my professional work. But it means that I'm not taking my professional gear with me all the time, and like trips and stuff like this stuff's just so much easier and compact to take with me. Like, I loved having my X100V and my X-T30 with me in Disney. I got some phenomenal photos, and honestly my X100V took like 90% of the photos because it was just around my side the whole time. It was great. So that's my thoughts on the Fuji X70. I would love to try other Fuji cameras someday if that's ever an option, but like I would love to try like the X-T4 because it still has the flip out screen, which I like. I don't like that they took that away from the X25, although I love that the X25 has other good features. But I mean, it's not really necessary for me. I have the Fujis I have for my like fun times, and I have the Canons for my professional work. The few Olympuses I have kept just because they're nostalgia for me, and they're something that I can't get rid of because they are what really got me into this like creative world. So that's all today.